meie tänased panelistid. Yes. Yes. Nii.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's like almost we are in a class where you have to line up based on on a height. But Marin, one foot is in from Estonia, but now in Ireland as a dean of education, Chevroni College. That's right.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. Right information. Kyle, you are traveling or taking us to States in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is your time in Estonia so far?
It's been wonderful, thanks.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And Miyako, half Japanese, but now in France.
Yes.
Yes. For joining us. So, are we ready to start?
We are.
Yeah, but we will start with video. Leo, I think one person we will certainly remember from the conference is Leo. So whenever you see Leo on the street, you are like remembering he's coming from assessment situation or something like that. Yeah, we have designed the panel so that each presenter has prepared a few ideas, and they will shortly present it just to get our conversation starting, and then we build on it and see if we can nudge or trigger each other. And maybe also have questions to each other, and let's try to do it together. Marin will start. You can get a clicker from there,
yeah.
And then we go from there.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. Like Piret was saying, I have one foot in Estonia and another one in Ireland. And why I'm particularly happy today is that I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, but also the people who have most influenced my way of thinking about learning and assessment. But regardless of that, I struggle. And I struggle a lot, well, with many things, but one of the things is assessment. I've had the experience to experience assessment here in Estonia, and I've experienced it in Ireland, and it's hard to say which one's better. I don't want to judge. But I've come across assessment, and I've thought a lot of times, is this the best that we can do? Is it really all that we can do? And I think it links a lot to the keynote speech this morning. Is it all we can do? Can we not do anything better? And I think there's few key ideas and values that I'd like to share, and one of them is trust. And I do believe that trust is really a cornerstone when we are talking about assessment. And few of the questions that I'd like to ask is, first of all, do we trust the learners in the process of assessment? Do we give them choices? Do we give them an opportunity to be themselves, to be the learners who are not stressed, who are in a situation where they can actually learn? In Ireland, we look a lot into universal design of learning, in short UDL. And with these principles in mind, we try to develop learning situations as well as assessment in a way that we give choice to our learners. So imagine you have the end of a module, at the end of the course, and you have a choice. Do I want to write an essay, or I prefer to do a podcast? Why not? And we give this choice to our students. And when they have choice, they own their learning. They're in control of their learning. They're agents of their own development. Another question is, do we trust assessment if we have not been the assessors? And this is the question I come across a lot in the context of recognition of prior learning, or PL, or in short in Estonian, võidab. In Irish context, we see credentials coming from across the world. And we don't trust them. We don't, because they look different. And how do we know how they've been assessed. Do they actually have that knowledge or skill, what we are saying, or what they are saying that they have? We are not sure. So what we do, we over-assess just to be sure. And the third question here is, who needs to trust the assessments? Is it the learner, the stakeholders, the others, your friends, colleagues, maybe your cat at home? And finally, awareness, which I do think it's absolutely crucial, is, are the learners trusting their own learning? Are they aware of their own learning? And I think this is the role for assessment, that it helps the learners to understand their own learning. And again, in the context of recognition of prior learning, we see that learners have no idea what they have learned, what they have studied. They might have a certificate, but what did they actually learn? They don't know. And I think this is where the role of assessment is, that we are helping the students to make their learning visible. Thank you.
Thank you, Marin. Yeah. Give it a go, Kyle.
All right.
Yes.
Well, again, thanks so much for inviting me and my colleague Mike over to Estonia. We've really enjoyed the hospitality. Just to share a few ideas about assessment. I'm coming at this topic as a sociologist. I've done research on employers and trying to understand what they're looking for, what are they hiring for, and that really informs my views on this. And I'm frankly kind of concerned that employers may not care that much about assessment occurring in higher education at all in this day and age. We all know that grade inflation has been a major phenomenon, not just in the United States, but in other countries. I was looking at some data yesterday from the United Kingdom, suggesting that the proportion of individuals with, a highly graded degree has gone from 50 to 75% over the course of 20 years. So grade inflation has been occurring everywhere. We have seen in the United States a real movement to remove degree requirements from job postings, to remove the requirement that one have a bachelor's degree for certain occupations. This has been called tearing the paper ceiling in the United States. There's been a large movement around this. And also we've seen this proliferation, just this explosion in the number of micro-credentials, non-degree and micro-credentials available, certificate programs, certification, industry certifications, and so on. When I say that I think employers are somewhat indifferent to assessment, we have data in the United States showing it's really a stunning drop in the number of employers that are screening individuals applying for a job for the first time out of their university degree on their grade point average, basically the average of all the grades they received in all their courses. 73% in 2018, down to 37% by 2023. So really a stunning drop. And it's not just I'll show you on the next slide, it's not just, and COVID may have played a part in it, but it's not just COVID possibly. Employers are saying in surveys that certificates and micro-credentials are just as good of a source of skills as credentials issued by formal higher education institutions. And we also see, and this is my own research that I've worked on, that we've gone out to travel to manufacturing firms and ask manufacturing workers and supervisors what they're looking for. And what we keep hearing is that employers actually have a high degree of confidence in their own ability to do assessment. They don't feel they have to rely on the assessments they get when an individual submits evidence of a degree or a transcript. They feel that went to facilities that made mining equipment in Montana, and they would say, first thing we do, if somebody says they know how to use our machines, we take them to the back room and we have them prove it to us. So employers have a lot of confidence in their ability to do their own pre-hire assessment. This is that survey I mentioned, really a stunning drop in really just 5 years. And you can see it's not like something that just plunged during COVID and then bounced back up. This is something that seems to be a more durable trend. That said, in the United States, there certainly have been some innovative practices around assessment. We've seen one of the major professional bodies, they have a smartphone app where you can just take 1 or 2 questions a day instead of sitting down for a whole big multiple choice examination that might have taken hours in the past. We've seen lots of efforts to kind of gamify, to allow learners to demonstrate their skills. There's Education Design Lab has a project right now in the US where they basically somebody can play a video game and they'll have the game recorded and it'll be assessed based on their ability to whether they show teamwork or problem solving or skills they might have been looking for, and then they can earn a micro-credential based on that assessment. And we see, obviously, micro-credentials spreading throughout the entire curriculum. I just made a little plug here for Credential As You Go, another initiative out of George Washington University where we're trying to break down the curriculum and create lots of small assessments, certifications, and certificates that are embedded within the degree. So there's just a few thoughts about what we see in the United States, and hopefully that resonates with some of you in Estonia as well.
Yes, thank you, Kyle, very much. Yeah, Miyako, floor is yours.
So after being in this field of system-level summative assessment, I think the most important thing for the assessment to be useful and relevant is to have a coherence among the 3 components: purpose of the assessment, and design, and the use of the results. And I would like to go through with the 3 slides within 3 minutes to talk about these 3 components using a PISA example. So countries participating in PISA, they are interested in knowing to what extent their young people are ready for the real-life challenges after they graduate from school. That's why PISA is testing 15 years old towards the end of the compulsory education system, how much students can apply their knowledge and skill in their real-life context. And skill and knowledge are not enough to really tackle the real-life challenges. It's important for students to have attitudes towards problem solving. They are willing to solve the problem solving, and students have to have an agency. So the PISA have a special definition of student competency, which go beyond knowledge and skills. And also the PISA, we wanted to make the information useful for policy making. Therefore, we collect the data from the questionnaire and see that what other countries are doing, not only the outcome, but the process of the learning, what is happening, we are measuring. So this is the peer learning process. So moving on to the design side. In the design side, there are 2 components, what to assess and how to assess. I'm more focusing on what to assess here. So we have to evolve in terms of what to assess. Even though countries are really interested in measuring trends over time, so we have to make a very difficult decision, trade-off of how much we keep the time for measuring trend and how much time devoted to the new things. And one solution is we are introducing an innovative domain every cycle. For example, in 2022, we introduced creative thinking. The last component is the analysis. So this has to be really aligned with the purpose of the assessment and the methodology and design of the assessment. So this is just a promotion of a report coming out on 13th of November. While I'm here enjoying the beautiful Tallinn and then attending this interesting conference, my team is very busy working on this report on student readiness for lifelong learning. So this report, we are looking at the important aspect of the student beyond performance, which will keep the student a continuous learner even after graduating school. So we look at learning strategies, motivation, and self-beliefs. So on 13th of this November, please take a look at this report, because yesterday we had a session on the Estonia being giant in PISA. You will check if Estonia is still giant in PISA in the context of lifelong learning. And also we looked at very interesting topic of whether the socioeconomically disadvantaged students, are they having a double hurdle or double challenges? We already know that there's always that there's socioeconomic performance gap. Disadvantaged students always perform lower than advantaged kids. But how about this learning strategy, motivation, self-beliefs? Do we see any socioeconomic gap in these important aspects? If so, it means that students are facing the double challenges. So please wait for the result coming out on 13th of November. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for bringing your perspectives. You remember, you said also, Marin, that choice is important. So we also gave you a choice what to present, and so we can build on it. And when I, again, was looking at all your slides, I was trying to see, so what is kind of a red thread connecting all you, because you looked at assessment on different levels. You started more on like a personal and learner, and maybe here some kind of a national trends are happening and what is happening in different contexts, whether it's formal labor market on kind of non-governmental sectors. And PISA is international, so it's very, very wide. But in a way, Miyako, you already kind of helped us bringing out a few key things to think about the purpose of assessment, no matter what is the context, what is the design, like how do you do it? Do you give choices or not? And what do you do with the result, for example? I think this is very key. So before we dive in, there was some first questions and what we have prepared. Like while you were listening to each other as well, like what is something that maybe draw your attention and you want to kind of pinpoint right away?
I think one thing that Kyle was mentioning about employers, it really links back to ORPL, the context that I'm working in, how employers they feel the need to use their own tools to assess, which means is that the same person is being over-assessed over and over and over again. It's often the same skills that are being assessed in a different context, by different people, by different methods and means as well. And I think this is something that we have been discussing in the ORPL context in Ireland, is that what can we do so that the learner doesn't need to go through those hurdles over and over again? Is one assessment enough? Do we need to do it, I don't know how many times? Surely over your life course you go through a lot of assessments, but can we perhaps limit it a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely opportunities out there to figure out, and I think there's exciting opportunities potentially with AI coming along to think about ways that we can make sure that we're really recognizing the results of previous assessments. We're seeing in the United States a major emphasis on the recognition of prior learning or prior learning assessment. There's different acronyms floating around. I won't confuse our interpreter by giving all of them, but they all mean the same thing, basically trying to figure out how do you assess learning that somebody might have done in an informal setting and give them credit for that in the classroom. Learning they might have done on the job with their employer, how can you make sure that they're getting some credit towards their degree for that? And there's a lot of efforts underway right now. Part of it is a technology problem, figuring out how do you analyze and do that at scale. Part of it's a policy problem. How do you get educators to accept the results of different assessments that might have been done in different places, and how do you get faculty, I think, in particular, to be comfortable with the idea of trusting assessment that was done by, someone other than themselves or someone outside their own institution. It's a thorny issue, but many are working on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kyle, when listening to Marin or Miyako, would you like to react or even ask a question?
I'm sorry?
If while you were listening to Marin or Miyako, is there something that somehow linked to you and you want to kind of connect?
Yes, definitely. I think trust, I thought, was an interesting place to start for this panel. There's a question, I think employers seem to be saying that they do not have a lot of trust, I think, when they say that they wish to go out and do their own assessments, and they're increasingly turning to third-party platforms and vendors that can do those assessments in cases where they might be hiring someone remotely, or if somebody is coming to work for them directly and they have the tools for the job easily accessible, they'll just do it themselves. So there's a question, I think trust is under, I think the trust issue was really exacerbated, was made much worse in the United States under COVID. I think that the trust, people saw the massive, that for over a year in most parts of the United States, in my own, where I reside in Maryland, our public schools were basically completely online for about a year and 3 months until there was sufficient vaccine distribution in 2021. So there was a really long period of time where everything was being done online. And I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting, that those credentials those assessments were valid. And I think that went on for such a long time that I think overall it's been a continuing issue of whether people really do trust assessments that are being done in higher education.
And in a kind of an online context, maybe later do you want to comment right away?
I do.
Because Chevron is totally online.
Yes, I do want to throw in that twist that Chevron College is an online college. So not only that we work remotely, but our students are remote, and surely we get scrutinized because of that to make sure, are we really trustworthy? Are we a real college? I can tell we are.
Yeah.
But the questions are constantly there, and I think is when Chevron goes through various validation procedures, we get scrutinized certainly more. And we need to show more that what we do is trustworthy, and the QA procedures that are all in place for it.
And of course, AI now, and the fear that AI could be used by students looking to keep ahead of, all the efforts are done on test security, that's thrown a new wrench into this. That's like we went from COVID straight into, generative AI. I feel like it was like we didn't really have a period of the old normalcy. And now certainly the higher education environment, many faculty are just not assigning examinations that they cannot personally monitor with their own 2 eyes right now, because they believe that anything will be done. Student will pull out their phone, ask ChatGPT for the answer, and they're afraid that they will not be able to, unlike the case of the admissions essays that were discussed yesterday, where they were able to identify that students had used AI to write those essays. Many of us, I think, in higher education are afraid that it's reached a point where we cannot detect it. So,
Miyako, any reactions from the key ideas and what we're already exploring?
I find that the trust is a really important part. And then in the PISA's context, especially the trust and especially the engagement part is challenging, because it's not a high-stake test for the student. So how can we trust that they are doing their best? Some students just answer yes. And how can we avoid it? And our current solution is to create a sense of community or sense of the control, so that all the students are also contributing to the future of their country's education. So maybe it's not directly back to, feedback will not be the student themselves, but future generation of your country will benefit of your effort participating in this study. So this is the kind of message we give, and then the participation rate is always very challenging, especially after the pandemic. Some kids are sick, so they couldn't attend the PISA test, or some parents prefer students to take their kids to study rather than doing assessment. So that response rate was very challenging part for us, but we try to convince the people and or talk with them and have a dialogue to create a sense of community that they are contributing to the parts of PISA, which is ultimately the beneficial for the country's future generation. So I find that trust is a really key point, but it's not easy to achieve, especially in the PISA's context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are also a few comments I take right away because they are kind of echoing the key ideas, and maybe just for clearing the air, it's good that for you, Kyle, especially, because it's also like looking at some of the trends, they are like a little bit like, is this really true and happening? So one question is that can we expect the kind of trends that you just described, that employers are less interested and trusting their own assessment when hiring, to filter down to universities when selecting high school graduates for enrollment. So but you said that employers trust their own assessment and not so much, for example, the kind of organized assessment, or is there still a long future for reliance on standardized testing? So maybe you want to comment on that.
That's an interesting question. In the United States, we've actually seen in the last academic year, we've seen some universities reinstate requirements for students to submit standardized test scores for admission. That some of those requirements had been removed previously, and those requirements are now being reinstated. And some of those were removed before the pandemic. There were fears about, for example, the idea that certain standardized tests might be biased against individuals from certain racial or ethnic backgrounds, certain socioeconomic backgrounds, that they might not be a reliable or valid indicator. And I think in the last year or two, we've seen a little bit of backtracking on that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Certainly, I think there was a long-term trend in general that higher education institutions, colleges and universities in the United States were looking to do as much as they could themselves to assess candidates through what we think of as typical aspects of the admissions process, such as writing essays, most statements of motivation and purpose. They're submitting academic records. They're evaluating extracurricular activities and recommendations and other things. So in the United States, I think we've always had at least at most university admissions applications have at least 4 or 5 components where you have all these requirements that do not exist in some European countries. Certainly, in much of Europe, you do not have to go get letters of recommendation. Go chase down your teachers from your high school and collect letters of recommendation. So I think that there is a point there, definitely, that there probably is some level of agency being claimed by higher education institutions to do their own evaluation.
Yes, very quick, one more quick question to you. So for Kyle, for you, employers in the US do not care about the grade average so much, but do they still tend to recruit from certain universities?
Absolutely, yes, they do. I think that it is still something that is, a phenomenon that we see most in certain professional fields like you can think of like banking or management consulting, where there's kind of a tradition of recruiting from more elite institutions. As a sociologist, I've always viewed that as, in part, that they're recruiting based on social status, not just academic performance and skill. And I think that's a harsh reality of the labor market that will probably persist for years, if not decades. Although certainly when we look at like I mentioned, the movement towards stop hiring individuals who are what they're calling STARS. STARS is an acronym. It's an STARS for individuals who are skilled through alternative routes. And that's the alternative. When they say alternative, that means alternative to a bachelor's degree. So skilled through life experience or maybe through industry certifications and micro-credentials that they might have accumulated. We certainly see, so I think the trend is pointing in that direction of less reliance on institutional reputation and institutional quality, perceived institutional quality, although it will be persistent, I think, for some years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as this guiding question for our panelists, like how do we design good assessment? Of course, we can explore a lot what is good. It's also like assessing what is good. But if we try to kind of find little answers to this question as well, so we a little bit touched that whenever we decide to do assessment, think about the purpose, like why you're doing it and who is involved. I remember, Marin, when we had a preparation call, then you said that what you are looking or what you're working with is how to make assessment more meaningful for students and also support the student well-being, because that's also assessment, as we also saw for Johanna, might be also a very stressful moment. So I'm just curious, like, how do you work with this question to make it more meaningful for the students?
It is the challenge. It's one of the big questions, how to create assessments that are more meaningful than they have been. And I think I've come across a lot of traditions that are in Irish higher and further education. A lot of the assessment is done by very, very traditional methods. So we see, there was a full program of 2 years program that had many different subjects in there, and they were using only one type of assessment, and that was an essay. So imagine you're studying for 2 years and all you do is write essays. I mean, they're great, but not that great. So what we've tried to do is rethink assessment for us. We've started with guidelines to change our way of thinking around assessment, and it's a struggle because it's hard to think differently about assessment if you've never seen it done differently. And what we're trying to do is that our assessments are more authentic, more related to real life as much as that is possible. And again, we are trying to give our learners a choice. Not everybody is great in writing an essay, but it doesn't mean that they don't have anything to say or they are not able to express their thoughts, but they might want to do it in a different way. And giving that choice to learner, we've seen that this works. There's been struggle with this as well, thinking like, how would a learner know what's best for them? And I've been asking back, well, if they don't know, then why you think that you know what's best for them? So I do believe that this choice in there, and it doesn't come easy for students either, if your first time there and you have to decide, but we need to start somewhere. So we are supporting them the best that we could so that we get to this ideal place eventually.
Yeah, so it is in a way a culture, but in different kind of culture as well. If you said that you are rethinking assessment, how do you engage the learners in the rethinking process?
Well, with learners, we've held many discussions and conversations with them as well. We are using self-assessment very similarly how it was described earlier today. And I think the fact that learners are able to assess themselves as well, this is what brings them into the process and they feel that they're part of it. And I see that being very, very important.
Yeah, so they are engaged somehow in the process. I think that's very important. And also that they give meanings to what assessment is, for example. Is it assessment for learning or as learning, as Johanna told before? So great, maybe we try, we experiment, we're in the process. I actually want to jump a little bit to Miyako, to you, because the impact of assessment, because we want to see somehow it or even touch or whatever. And you pointed it is like, how do we use the results, whatever context you're doing, even like PISA, for example. It's just, we can read the reports, but do we actually use what it's intended to? Because I know that what you're also concerned is like how it can be used, not only like for policy development, but actually for, let's say, everyday education development. So maybe you can a little bit share your perspectives on that.
Yes. So report is one of the things that we are doing as a communication, but at the same time, upon request, we consult with the countries, and then the government asks us to share some information, and then before they decide on the policies, that they ask us what's our view, And then ultimate goal is for the government to make a best decision with the available information. And sometimes it's very difficult to find the relevant information from PISA report, which is like massive pages. So that, we are happy to provide that kind of service to discuss that now if it is a school choice or grade repetition or streaming the tracking. And then if some country wanted a tracking, what are the pitfalls? What are the parts that country have to be careful before deciding to implement it? So we have a lot of that kind of dialogue directly with the government. So that's what we are doing. And also we are quite confident our report is accurate and then also balanced, because we have a very traditional set process of country review. So whatever the OECD produce, country review it, and they do the fact check as well as whether the OECD interpretation is aligned with the country context. Because our background is, I'm from Japan, I know a little bit about the Japanese education, but I may not know other 90 countries' education system well enough. So it's important to have this country's review to make sure that any interpretation we give is neutral. What is very challenging is we want to make the PISA data publicly available. So all the micro-level data are available on the public website, and anyone can analyze the PISA data. But in order to correctly, accurately analyze the PISA data, it's important to know the purpose of the PISA report, PISA, and also the methodology and the design of the PISA. So unfortunately, there is some misuse or misinterpretation of the PISA data, and then sometimes it's sensationally, it is reported in the media or articles. So I think the number of misuse and misinterpretation is decreasing over the last 20 years, but we take this as a good opportunity to improve our communication approach. So maybe our way of communicating, the methodology may not be clear enough. So every time there is that kind of unfortunate misuse, misinterpretation, we going back to our design, the methodology part, and then also the how especially communicate our methodology to the public.
Mm-hmm. I was just listening to and connecting to yesterday that it is a skill to analyze the result. Yeah, really understand how it's done and and yeah, as you said, communicate, but also how to use it wisely and kind of create a shared understanding. So kind of an area of development, maybe like understanding like research process, for example, as well. Kaile, back to you as well. What really kind of struck me the most was this. This kind of drive towards this kind of everyday assessment. You were talking about how in the employment context there is this like every day you can use, I don't know, an app and test and all this kind of need for a quick feedback in a way, where this drive comes from, what do you think? And I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but it's just like it's somehow draw my attention, because does it also create a stress that yet you're basically every day kind of seeing like how I'm doing and like why it's needed, like who benefits from it? I think that's a number of questions regarding this everyday testing.
I would say the opposite. I think it's actually intended to reduce stress. If it's done well, that's part of one of the reasons why we saw the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence, which is an industry certification board for automotive repair workers in the United States, why they introduced a smartphone app with, like I said, a couple of questions, a few questions a week, or every other week, was that as an alternative to sitting down and taking one big examination every other year to renew and retain that certification. It was actually retention, trying to make sure that people kept their credential and kept renewing and earning again and again and earning higher level credentials to make it easier to fit testing and assessment into one's life. Obviously, the whole industry, I think the industry certification bodies in the United States have been among the most innovative, probably more innovative than most higher education institutions on average, at creating assessments that are really designed to put the person being examined first and really reduce that anxiety. Test anxiety is a real issue, especially for adult learners, people who have not been, if you're coming back to school, if you have not been in a classroom for 20 years and you're coming back, what are you most afraid of? Taking tests, probably. And that's a way...
Or presentation, like public presentation. Is a second.
Public presentation, yep, that's another one, definitely. But that was seen as a way to actually make sure that individuals would stay enrolled, to stay, I think that in other, not just in those industry certification bodies, but in higher education institutions, if you're doing a weekly quiz instead of one big examination at the end of a semester, at the end of the academic year, that's a way to make sure that the students are more comfortable. If they perform very well on those early examinations, they will feel empowered that, like, I'm actually doing well and I should keep going. If they're doing poorly, you can flag those issues early and they can make corrections early. And I think that's actually seen, by and large, as a net positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in a way also we come back to this design, that you can design it in a way that, I think that's one of the challenge, maybe problematic place with assessment, that we try to do it at the end and we don't really see the places of improvement which should be at the focus as well. It feels like we're just starting and then I'm also knowing that a very important coffee break is coming. And I have to ask it, I was kind of, I cannot, I have to ask it because I think many actually had the same question, so I ask from the behalf of everyone. And we little bit warned Miyako that you know that Estonia is very high in PISA. You also mentioned, but we are high in PISA results, but our students are unhappy. So what PISA shows then, and what's the importance of it?
So, performance-wise, the Estonia is high, but after the pandemic, the performance went down. And what is the most worrisome is the lower end of the performance really went down. The speed of the decline is not the same, the top end and then the bottom end. And then especially this bottom end are mainly coming from the disadvantaged students. And then advantaged student performance slightly went down, but not statistically significant, but disadvantaged student, socioeconomically disadvantaged student, they went down a lot over the last 4 years. So this is something that really look into. In terms of the equity point of view, it's very important. And also the sense of belonging at school. Student sense of belonging at school is not really high in Estonia. So what does it really mean? Why it is so I think this is the area also we need to pay attention in Estonia's result. And then more coming in November.
More coming out, and I think maybe it's again like how to read it in a way and really understand like where this comes from, because I think this is also very complex issue to read out and see how things are connected. Let's somehow try to round up. So in terms of designing good assessment, maybe one piece of wisdom that you want to leave us with, something to think about, rethink, ask maybe new questions from each of you.
I think one piece of wisdom, I think assessment needs to be meaningful and meaningful for the learner. And I think it's like when you're designing assessment, think about it in this way as well. Is that an assessment that you want to do yourself? If your answer is no, then probably you need to rethink your assessment. Simple as that.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I was tempted to come in saying that, assessment doesn't really matter in the sense employers don't care, but I think that I'll give a more nuanced answer and say I think that if you're coming out from a higher education institution and, trying to reform your assessments, definitely, I think that I think there is good reasons why we're seeing a movement towards incremental credentialing, whether it be through creating micro-credentials within your curriculum where you might get where you might be doing assessments based on a couple months of work as opposed to a year of work. I think that anything that you can do to kind of break it down, do it gradually, give learners that immediate feedback, that's what will improve achievement. And that's what will be really valuable, especially, I think, to those disadvantaged learners, people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds who need the most support. That they don't, I've seen, and this is actually, it reminds me of my own experience as an instructor when I was teaching introductory sociology. I remember that a student, came to me at the end of the semester and he had failed his final exam and there was nothing that I could do. And as an instructor, I was heartbroken. Mm-hmm. If we had caught those problems early, it would have made a world of difference.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think that thinking about considering the test taker's well-being that came up today's discussion is really important to obtain the trustworthy data. And then technology can help to increase the well-being while collecting the data. For example, in PISA, we shifted the computer-based assessment 2015, and then gradually we are introducing adaptive testing. So students, they don't need to take super difficult item. They will receive the item which is matched to your skill. So that will decrease the anxiety and boredness. So that I hope that technology is not the fear, but technology will help us to give more well-being considered assessment to the test taker.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. So something about make it meaningful and maybe also engage more the learners themselves. I think they also have lots of answers actually in the process. And then the process, I really like this. That's, I think, one of the maybe shifts in my own practice to think it more like, how you say it, in little parts. So it's not at the end of the course or any kind of process, but I think we want to know how we are doing. So this kind of immediate feedback, and then see how do you work with data and maybe help of technology, etc. Thank you so much for being with us on stage and sharing your perspectives on assessment. Are we ready for a little pause now?
Thank you.